My name is Sarah Whitlock, and I was 35 years old when a bank fraud alert hit my phone at 6:14 on a Tuesday evening, telling me that a $62,000 withdrawal request had been placed on my grandmother's savings account using my power of attorney authority and my signature. I was standing in my kitchen in Minneapolis with my coat still on, one shoe half off, and a grocery bag on the counter leaking cold water from a bag of melting ice. For 1 second, I thought it was a phishing scam because I am a bank fraud analyst and I know how fake urgency sounds. Then I saw the last 4 digits of Grandma Alice's account, the exact account I monitored for her, the account where I had set custom alerts because she was 89 years old, stubborn, trusting, and surrounded by family members who loved her until money became visible. I opened the alert. Large withdrawal request pending verification. Requested by agent under POA. Signature on file confirmed. Amount, $62,000. I stood completely still. My grandmother did not withdraw $62,000. I did not authorize $62,000. And the only people in the family desperate enough to see her savings as a rescue rope were my mother Denise and my younger brother Ryan. Before I tell you how I walked into a bank fraud review 5 days later with the withdrawal slip, the copied signature source, the security timestamp, and my grandmother's handwritten note in one folder, tell me this. What time is it where you are right now, and where are you watching from? I want to know how far this story travels before I tell you what happens when a family calls theft peace, when a mother uses an elderly woman's trust as cover, and when the daughter who has spent her whole life quietly cleaning up everyone else's money mess finally stops making the mess invisible. Money showed people faster than words did in my family. Grandma Alice used to say that while she folded her bank statements at the little oak table in her apartment and lined up the envelopes by date, I never fully understood what she meant when I was younger. I do now. My brother Ryan had always been the family's one clean start away son. That was the phrase my mother loved. Ryan just needs one clean start, one better loan, one new partner, one more month, one chance to breathe, one break, one reset. By the time he was 32, he had already burned through a landscaping business, a used equipment resale scheme, and a food distribution side hustle that somehow ended with him owing money to 3 friends, 2 vendors, and a cousin who stopped speaking to us for almost a year. None of that changed how my mother talked about him. Denise Whitlock loved calling Ryan misunderstood, pressured, unlucky, or generous to a fault. She never once called him what he was, which was reckless and deeply practiced at looking earnest while somebody else paid for it. My father Leonard was easier to explain and harder to forgive. He did not create the family lie. He stabilized it. He was the man who never shouted, never exploded, never openly stole anything, and still made every wrong thing possible by calling it a misunderstanding before it could be judged as a decision. If Ryan missed a payment, Dad said the timing got tight. If Ryan lied to a lender, Dad said he was embarrassed. If Ryan asked for money, Dad said he was trying. Leonard Whitlock's entire emotional philosophy was that nothing was serious if he could call it stressful enough times. And then there was me, Sarah, the daughter who handled forms, the daughter who knew account numbers, PIN reset rules, insurance billing cycles, pharmacy gaps, account alerts, tax notices, login questions, and routing numbers. The daughter who did not forget due dates, the daughter who did not need rescuing, which in my family meant the daughter whose stability could be harvested whenever someone else lit themselves on fire. My mother liked introducing me by saying, "Sarah understands money." It sounded proud if you did not know her. What she meant was, Sarah will fix the financial embarrassment after the emotionally important people are done causing it. I learned that young. At 14, I balanced the checkbook because my father said I was more patient. At 17, I spent a Saturday calling utility providers because my parents had let 3 late notices pile up unopened on the microwave. At 23, when Ryan forgot to pay an auto loan and nearly lost his truck, my mother cried in my apartment and said, "You know how to talk to banks. He doesn't." At 27, I missed a promotion interview at the bank where I worked because Denise called in tears saying Ryan had taken out payday loans and did not understand the rollover terms. I spent 3 hours helping untangle it while my mother said he had more to lose than I did. That sentence stayed inside me for years. He had more to lose than I did. I was not the child who got protected. I was the child who got assigned. Grandma Alice saw it more clearly than anyone. She was my father's mother, small-boned, sharp-eyed, and the kind of elderly woman who moved slowly but understood the room before anyone else finished talking. She never used big speeches. She would just say one clean sentence and leave it sitting there until the rest of us caught up. When I was in my 20s and first started working in fraud operations, I helped her update direct deposit forms and set up statement review alerts. She looked at me once over her reading glasses and said, "Money shows people faster than words do." I smiled and asked if that meant she did not trust the family. She smiled back. "I trust people best when the paper is honest." Later, when her knees got worse and I started helping with bill pay, insurance premiums, and medical copays, she asked me to hold a small brass key for her. It was the key to the lockbox where she kept her will, savings records, life insurance information, and a folder marked, "If things feel strange." She said, "If anything ever feels rushed, look in the box before you look at people's faces." The power of attorney came 2 years before the withdrawal attempt. Grandma did it because she wanted one person who could handle medical billing issues, bank verification, and insurance paperwork if she ever got confused or temporarily hospitalized. She chose me. Not my father, not Ryan, me. I did not ask for it. In fact, I told her to think carefully because families get weird around legal authority. She patted my hand and said, "That is exactly why I'm not choosing the weird ones." We met with her attorney. We signed properly. We kept copies. I added bank alerts, a flagged withdrawal threshold, and a separate internal note through the institution handling her savings, so any large, unusual request would generate verification. I did that because I am a fraud analyst and because I knew my family. You can call that cynical. I call it biography. The inciting wound, the moment I should have realized what was coming, happened at Grandma Alice's 89th birthday dinner. We held it in the private room of a neighborhood restaurant she liked because the pot roast was soft enough for her and the staff never rushed her coffee. I arranged the reservation, picked up the cake, brought her cardigan, handled the gift envelopes, and spent 20 minutes in the lobby arguing with the hostess because my mother had changed the guest count twice and not told anyone. Ryan walked in late with flowers from a grocery store cooler and got hugged like a war hero. My mother beamed at him all evening. At one point, after dessert, she raised her glass and thanked Ryan for always being there for Grandma emotionally, which was rich, considering I was the one refilling prescription gaps and reconciling billing statements. Then she looked at me and laughed that little laugh she used whenever she wanted to humiliate me and call it affection. "Sarah will handle the account paperwork anyway," she said. "Forms are your thing." Ryan smirked and added, "You handle forms, Sarah. Don't act like signing for Grandma makes you special." People at the table went quiet. My father made his tired face, the one that said, "Why can't women just absorb things gracefully?" I remember looking at Grandma then. She did not laugh. She looked straight at Ryan and said, "The person who signs is the person I trust." Then she turned to me and squeezed my wrist under the table. That was Grandma Alice, Never loud, always exact. A week after that dinner, she asked me to stop by her apartment. She had the brass key on the table next to a cup of tea and a white envelope with my name written across the front. "Your mother keeps talking about how the family should help Ryan get steady," she said. "It makes my stomach hurt." I told her no one could touch her money without the proper authority and verification. She nodded, then pushed the envelope toward me. Inside was a handwritten note on lined paper folded twice. It said, "Sarah, do not let anyone make my savings look like love just because they found your signature. If Ryan needs help, they can ask honestly, and hear no honestly too." That note became the difference between my family's version and my grandmother's. I placed it in the lockbox and never mentioned it to anyone. After Grandma's birthday, Ryan's financial pressure got worse. I knew because family chaos always leaks, even when nobody sends the full memo. My mother started speaking about him in crisis tones again. Ryan was dealing with lenders. Ryan had grown. Ryan was trying to make good on old mistakes. Ryan needed family unity. I later learned he had taken out a business loan tied to a small logistics venture with a partner who had already backed out. He was behind. A lender had started pushing. My mother framed it differently, of course. "He just needs room to breathe." That is another phrase I no longer trust. In my family, breathing room always came out of someone else's oxygen supply. Meanwhile, I kept doing the invisible labor. I paid Grandma's pharmacy gap twice when her prescription plan lagged. I reviewed her statements every month. I set up duplicate alerts because her email confused her. I dealt with a billing error at the clinic and got her supplemental plan to reimburse. Ryan visited her with flowers sometimes. My mother posted photos of that online. "Grandma's favorite grandson," she would write. Not because it was true, because emotionally visible care plays better on social media than boring financial protection. The alert about the $62,000 withdrawal came on a Tuesday. Once I saw it was real, I logged into the secure account portal. The request had been initiated in branch. There was a pending hold because the amount exceeded the internal threshold and required secondary review due to the account owner's age and the POA note on file. The withdrawal slip showed my name as acting agent under power of attorney. Beneath it was a signature. Not mine today, but mine from somewhere else. I knew it immediately. It had the slightly tighter S I used years ago before I changed my handwriting after hand strain at work. It had been copied from an old account access form I signed when Grandma first added me to the account file. Somebody had taken a prior signature, lifted it, and placed it where they needed it. I called the bank's fraud review line from my personal phone, identified myself, and locked the account from outbound non-essential transfers pending investigation. Then I called Patricia Lane, my mentor in elder fraud review, the woman who taught me half of what I knew about abuse disguised as family help. Patricia listened without interruption and said, "Do not argue with them first. Preserve the trail." That is the kind of advice that saves reputations and sanity. I pulled the POA file, the old access form, signature card history, portal activity, and alert log. I requested the in-branch timestamp and internal note. Then I checked Grandma's document box with the brass key. Her handwritten note was still there. So was everything else. Nobody had touched the box. That mattered. It meant the theft did not come through her consent. It came around her. Megan called me before I called my family. Megan was Ryan's wife, though saying that out loud always felt temporary because their marriage existed mostly as two exhausted people orbiting one another through his damage. She sounded scared. "Sarah, I think you should know Ryan was talking about using Grandma's savings to cover the business note before the bank called it," she said. I sat down hard in the kitchen chair. "Using it how?" Megan hesitated. "He said Mom thought it would be okay if it was just temporary, and if you handled the paperwork after. She forwarded me a screenshot from Ryan's phone, one he had accidentally left open on the kitchen counter. My mother had texted him, "If the funds move before the lender calls it, Sarah can calm the account side later." That sentence was like being slapped with my whole family history at once. Not ask Sarah. Not tell Grandma. Move it first. Calm Sarah later. I realized then that their confidence had never come from believing they were right. It came from believing I had been trained not to expose them. I sent one formal non-consent statement that night to the bank fraud unit, Grandma's attorney, and the elder financial exploitation contact our institution coordinated with on certain cases. I stated that I had not authorized the withdrawal, had not signed the slip, and had not used my power of attorney authority for any transfer of Grandma Alice Whitlock's savings. I attached the copied signature comparison, the account alert record, and the relevant note that a suspicious withdrawal request had been made in branch. Then I froze Grandma's account access to supervised review only. That was when the phone started. At 10:31 p.m., my mother called. She did not say hello. "What did you tell the bank?" she asked. Her voice was already high and tight. I answered on speaker because Patricia was sitting at my table by then, and I wanted a witness. The truth. There was a pause, then that inhale my mother always took right before she shifted from manipulative to offended. "Sarah, you had no right to escalate this before talking to family." I almost laughed. Family had already talked without me. Someone used my name and power of attorney authority to request $62,000 from Grandma's savings. Ryan came on next. "You're making this sound worse than it is." "Then improve the facts," I said, "because the facts are terrible." My father grabbed the phone long enough to say, "Stop treating family like a fraud case." Patricia wrote that sentence down. She did not smile. Then my mother made the mistake that blew the whole mask off. Ryan needed the money before his lender called the note due. There it was. Not Grandma needed support, not an emergency for Alice, not family peace. Ryan's lender. Ryan's debt. Grandma's savings were not Ryan's second chance. I said that out loud. Grandma's savings were not Ryan's second chance. My mother started crying. She would have wanted family peace. Then she could have been asked honestly. Ryan cut in. It was temporary. Temporary theft is still theft. My father muttered, "Jesus, Sarah." I touched the brass key on the table. "You have 72 hours. Withdraw the request formally. Notify Grandma's attorney. Disclose Ryan's loan situation. Confirm in writing that my signature was used without consent. And sign a no account access agreement." My mother whispered, "Fix it." I said, "I am." Then I hung up. The smear campaign began before breakfast the next morning. Denise sent a family group message saying I was choosing bank rules over Grandma's peace. She told relatives I was trying to control Grandma's money and punish Ryan because he had struggled publicly, while I always got to look responsible. She told church friends I was obsessed with fraud and could not see the human side of hardship. My father told an uncle that I was letting Ryan lose his business out of spite. That one actually stung because it was so stupid and still so familiar. Whenever I refused to be used, the refusal became aggression. In their story, boundaries were violence. I nearly caved around noon. That is the part people do not romanticize when they talk about standing up to family. The old training does not disappear because you collect proof. I thought about Grandma finding out there had been a fraud review on her account. I thought about Ryan's daughters. I thought about the way relatives would repeat my mother's version because family is complicated, and nobody likes the woman who pulls bank language into the living room. Patricia sat with me over coffee and said, "Sarah, a power of attorney is a duty of protection, not a blank family permission slip." That sentence brought me back to center. I was not choosing rules over people. I was choosing an elderly woman's intent over a man's debt. The private truth room happened the following evening at my apartment table. I chose my place because the brass key, the POA folder, the withdrawal slip, and Grandma's handwritten note were all there. Denise arrived first, carrying her handbag like a shield. Leonard came behind her, already exhausted by accountability.
Ryan came in last with his jaw tight and his shirt too crisp for a man claiming collapse.
Megan came too, which made my mother visibly nervous. Patricia sat beside me with a pad of notes, calm as winter. I laid everything out. The withdrawal slip, the copied signature comparison beside the old account access form, the POA document, the lender email Megan had found, Grandma's note, the brass key. My mother saw the note and immediately said, "You always make things look so dramatic." "No," I said. "I make them visible." Ryan started first. "You're blowing up a temporary family solution by using Grandma's savings without Grandma's consent." She would have said yes. I slid her note toward him. He did not pick it up. "No," I said. She said no in advance to exactly this. My mother tried the peace route. Grandma trusted us. She trusted me with the power of attorney because she did not trust this kind of shortcut. My father said, "This is what I mean. You talk like you're cross-examining us." Patricia finally spoke. "That tends to happen when an unauthorized withdrawal carries a copied signature." The room went quiet because an outsider had turned their family fog into a sentence. Then I placed the withdrawal slip beside the old account access form. "This signature is lifted," I said. "Same angle, same line pressure, same old style I do not even use anymore." Ryan shrugged badly. "Maybe you signed more than you remember." That was insulting enough that even my father winced. I opened the portal activity record and pointed to the in-branch timestamp. The request was initiated while I was in my office on a monitored shift. There is badge entry and camera coverage if you need a geometry lesson. Megan then placed Ryan's lender email on the table. The subject line referenced a note called deadline. My mother actually reached for it like she could physically stop the evidence. Too late. Patricia read it. I read it. My father read just enough to know the lie had a body. Ryan muttered, "You had no right to go through my messages." But he said it to Megan, not to me. That was the thing men like Ryan do when proof appears. They complain about the route, not the conduct. Then I read Grandma's note aloud. "Do not let anyone make my savings look like love just because they found your signature." My mother closed her eyes. For a second, I thought maybe shame had finally arrived. It had not. She opened them and said, "She was old. She worried." That was the ugliest sentence of the night. Not because it was loud, because it tried to erase an elderly woman's clarity the moment her clarity became inconvenient. I looked straight at my mother and said, "You do not get to borrow her trust and then dismiss her judgment." Ryan tried one last pivot. "So what? You'd rather the lender destroy me?" I touched the brass key. "I'd rather you stop treating every woman in this family like an emergency fund." That landed harder than anything else. My father stared at the table. Megan looked like she wanted to cry. My mother whispered, "You're making your brother sound like a criminal." "No," I said. "The withdrawal slip did that." I repeated my terms. Withdraw the request. Notify the attorney. No further access. No more using Grandma's accounts as a life raft. Ryan said, "If the bank flags me, I'm finished." Patricia answered before I could.
You should have thought about that before trying to move $62,000 under someone else's authority. The room ended there. Not with reconciliation. With exposure. The public truth room came at the bank fraud review and elder finance attorney meeting 2 days later. Present were the fraud officer, the branch manager, Grandma's attorney, Patricia, Megan, my parents, Ryan, and me. The bank had already blocked the withdrawal, but because a POA misuse was involved, and my mother kept insisting it was a misunderstanding, the review mattered.
My mother opened with, "This is a family matter that got overcomplicated." The fraud officer did not look impressed. She asked me directly, "Did you authorize this withdrawal?" "No." "Did you sign this slip?" "No." "Were funds requested for Grandma's care?" "Not to my knowledge. They were tied to Ryan's debt issue." Ryan shifted in his chair. The branch manager asked him whether he had requested the withdrawal. He said, "We were trying to help the family." The attorney asked, "Which family member benefited from the $62,000? Ryan did not answer. Megan did. Ryan's business note. That was the first hard shift. A wife had chosen the truth over the family script. I then presented the copied signature comparison. Patricia explained how prior signatures on account access documents are sometimes misused when families assume internal familiarity will carry them through. She also explained that a power of attorney imposes fiduciary duty, not family convenience. My father tried to say I had verbally agreed during Grandma's birthday weekend that I would help if things got bad. I almost admired the desperation. I opened the audio file from Grandma's birthday dinner. My mother's voice played first. "Forms are your thing." Then Ryan's. "You handle forms, Sarah. Don't act like signing for Grandma makes you special." Then Grandma's voice. "The person who signs is the person I trust." The room went silent. The fraud officer wrote something down. The branch manager leaned back. My refusal had existed before the theft. Their contempt for the authority I held had existed before the theft. And Grandma's trust had existed before the theft. That was the face-slap-proof moment. Then the attorney placed Grandma's handwritten note on the table and read it aloud. Not loudly, just clearly. My mother's whole body seemed to shrink. Ryan looked sick. The fraud officer asked Denise, "Did you instruct or encourage use of Sarah's authority or signature for this transaction?" My mother's answer was one of the saddest things I have ever heard. "We only needed a temporary bridge." Not no, not misunderstanding. Need. Bridge. Access. The exact language of theft dressed in family softness. The consequences came next, professional and devastating. The bank permanently blocked the withdrawal. The fraud unit flagged the account for heightened monitoring and documented an attempted unauthorized withdrawal under potential elder exploitation review. Grandma's attorney updated the POA safeguards so that all large transactions now required direct legal notice as well as internal verification. Ryan's business loan rescue collapsed because the funds did not arrive before the lender call date. My mother lost any informal say over Grandma's banking communication because every statement and alert now came only through formal channels. The church talk Ryan had been scheduled to give that Sunday about family responsibility quietly disappeared after Megan forwarded the bank review notice to the pastor who had invited him. My father walked out first. My mother cried in the parking lot and said, "You humiliated us." I looked at the brass key in my hand and said, "No, I protected Grandma." Ryan said, "You could have saved me." I answered, "You tried to buy saving with someone else's name." Telling Grandma was the hardest part. I did not tell her every detail because elderly people deserve dignity, not procedural trauma. But I did tell her someone had tried to move a large amount without her permission and that I had stopped it. She went very quiet. Then she said, "Was it family?" I said yes. She looked at the little teacup in her hands for a long time, then said, "I'm glad it was you holding the key." That nearly broke me. Not because I wanted praise, because elderly trust is so light and so heavy at the same time. She had handed me duty, and I had nearly lost it to family rot. The aftermath inside the family was ugly, predictable, and still somehow exhausting. Denise told relatives I was greedy, controlling, and trying to hoard Grandma's money as if I were waiting for an inheritance. Leonard said I should have handled it quietly. He always says that when what he means is, "Why couldn't you let us save face and lose facts?" Ryan blamed me for the loan collapse. Megan moved out 3 weeks later. She told me over coffee that she had spent years confusing loyalty with repair work. I understood that sentence too well. The part that changed me most was not winning the review. It was realizing how many older women and adult daughters live in that exact trap. Family members using love as leverage against paperwork. POA treated like shared access. Elder savings treated like flexible cash. Adult daughters expected to sign, smooth, and absorb. Patricia encouraged me to turn the whole thing into something useful. At first, I refused. I did not want to become the woman whose life lesson was her family's attempted theft. She listened and then said, "Then don't teach theft, teach protection." That was the opening I needed. With Patricia and a local senior advocacy nonprofit, I built the Brass Key Elder Finance Guide. We started with the practical basics: what a power of attorney actually is, what it is not, how to set bank alerts, how to document elder intent, what suspicious withdrawals look like, how to use attorney contact structures, what to do when a family member says, "Just move it temporarily," and how to separate caregiving from account access. We also added scripts. No, POA does not let me lend someone else Grandma's money. No, urgency is not authorization. No, family peace is not a banking instruction. The first line of the guide said, "Power of attorney is not family permission." The second said, "Grandmother's savings are not someone else's second chance." At our first workshop, I placed the little brass bank box key on the table. People noticed it immediately. A retired teacher asked why I kept showing it. I said, "Because access is the real story." That room went still, in the same way it always does, when the right truth arrives before the softer one. A widower asked whether his son needed to be on his accounts, just in case. An adult daughter whispered that her brothers kept asking why she needed statements if everybody trusted each other. A nurse said her aunt had pressured her to sign bank forms for a mother who was already confused. I taught them the same thing I had to learn the hard way. Love is not the absence of structure. Real love survives structure. What demands access and gets angry at documentation is not trust, it is entitlement. The guide grew. Senior centers asked for copies. Attorneys referred families. A community banker invited me to speak about elder account pressure. Patricia joked that my mother had accidentally funded a curriculum through bad behavior. She was not wrong. Ryan still does not speak to me unless it is through the occasional mean text I do not answer and always save. My mother still tells versions of the story where she is the wounded peacemaker and I am the rigid daughter who loves rules more than family. My father still sighs whenever legal words enter the room. None of that changes the record. The record is clear. A $62,000 withdrawal was attempted from my grandmother's account using my copied signature and my legal authority. The withdrawal was blocked. The elder was protected. The trust was honored. The family image cracked. I still keep Grandma Alice's handwritten note folded inside the POA folder, and I still carry the brass key on a separate ring. Some evenings after work, when I come home from a day of reviewing fraud patterns and suspicious activity, I put that key on the counter and think about how ordinary evil can look in a family. Not dramatic evil, soft evil, practical evil. The kind that says, just this once, just temporarily, just until the lender calls, just for peace, just help your brother, just use the form, just sign this, just calm the bank after. That is how elderly money disappears, not usually through strangers in ski masks, but through relatives who know exactly which daughter will be told she is selfish if she reads too carefully. Money shows people faster than words do. Grandma was right. A family that calls your boundaries selfish while hiding elder account theft under your signature does not want peace. It wants access without consent. My signature was not Ryan's emergency fund. Grandma's savings were not his rescue plan. The brass key in my hand opened a box full of papers, yes, but it also opened the truth about who in that family believed trust meant ownership. If the people who said they loved your grandmother treated her account like a solution to their embarrassment, would you still call that family help? And if the key an old woman gave you became the thing that protected her from the very people sitting at her birthday table, would you hand it back to keep the peace? Or would you keep it in your pocket and teach every daughter in the room that access is not the same thing as love?